A billionaire tech CEO gave his unlimited credit card to a homeless single father. What the man bought in 24 hours didn't just shock the billionaire, it shattered everything he thought he knew about human nature. Dylan Mitchell had built an empire by 29. His fintech startup processed millions of transactions daily. His penthouse overlooked the Golden Gate Bridge. Yet standing in his floor-to-ceiling windows that December morning, he felt utterly empty. The previous night had been another charity gala, another evening of writing checks to causes he barely understood. His father's voice echoed from their last conversation 3 years ago. People like that will take everything you give them. They don't deserve your compassion, Dylan. That conversation had ended their relationship. The same conversation where Dylan had finally told his venture capitalist father about his sexuality. The same night he'd been cut off from the family fortune. The same night he'd learned that unconditional love often came with conditions. Walking through the financial district toward his morning coffee, Dylan noticed things he'd trained himself not to see. The man clutching a cardboard sign, the woman digging through garbage bins, the family huddled beneath the freeway overpass. He stopped. Something about the scene beneath the Bay Bridge approach caught his attention. A young man, maybe mid-30s, sat on cardboard with a small child sleeping against his shoulder. The boy couldn't have been older than 6, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. The man's sign read single father, homeless, will work for food. But it wasn't the sign that made Dylan's chest tighten. It was the way the man looked at his sleeping son. Like nothing in the entire world mattered more than keeping that child warm, safe, alive. The father's eyes held a fierce protectiveness Dylan had never seen before. Dylan found himself walking closer, his expensive Italian shoes crunching on broken glass. The man looked up, startled, as if kindness itself was foreign. "I'm sorry, sir," the man said quickly, his voice hoarse but respectful. "We're not bothering anyone." The words hit Dylan like a physical blow. Here was a man who had lost everything, yet still worried about being an inconvenience. "What's your name?" Dylan asked, crouching down despite his $3,000 suit. "Marcus Rodriguez," the man replied cautiously. "And this is my son, Jamie." The child stirred, opening tired brown eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. He looked at Dylan with curiosity rather than fear, then buried his face back into his father's chest. Dylan reached into his wallet and pulled out something that made Marcus's breath catch. A black American Express card with no preset spending limit. The same card Dylan used to buy companies. Marcus stared at the plastic rectangle like it was a live wire. "Sir, I don't understand." Dylan's heart pounded as he placed the card in Marcus's trembling hand. "This is yours for 24 hours. No limits. No questions asked. Buy whatever you want. I just want to see something." The question hung unspoken between them. In a world that had taught Dylan to expect the worst from people, in a life where his own father had chosen money over love, Dylan needed to believe that goodness still existed. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly. No promises, no guarantees, just a nod weighted with gratitude and fear. As Marcus carefully tucked the card into his jacket pocket and gathered Jamie in his arms, Dylan stepped back into the morning crowd. His hands shook as he walked away, not from the cold, but from the magnitude of what he'd just done. If Marcus bought drugs, Dylan would know. If he disappeared into the city's underground, Dylan would know. But if this homeless single father used unlimited wealth for something unexpected, something that challenged everything Dylan had been taught about human nature, then maybe there was still hope. Dylan stood watching until they disappeared into the maze of city streets, his heart louder than the traffic around him. He'd just handed over enough financial power to change a life forever. What he didn't realize was that Marcus Rodriguez was about to change his. Sometimes the most profound tests aren't the ones we give others, but the ones that reveal who we really are when we're brave enough to believe. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more journeys about the families we choose. Dylan couldn't sleep. His Nob Hill penthouse felt like a mausoleum. He paced between the windows in his kitchen island, checking his phone obsessively for transaction alerts that never came. Midnight passed, Then 2 a.m., then 4. No activity on the card. Nothing. The silence was worse than any spending spree could have been. Why wasn't Marcus using the card? Was he afraid? Did he think it was some cruel joke? Or worse, had something happened to him and Jamie in the dangerous corners where people without homes learn to disappear? Dylan opened his laptop and pulled up the real-time account activity. The last charge had been his own dinner the previous evening at an exclusive restaurant where he'd eaten alone, where a single meal cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. As dawn broke over the Bay Area, painting his penthouse walls gold and pink, Dylan's phone finally chimed. His heart jumped as he saw the notification. Transaction Andronico's Market, Upper West Side, $47.32. Then another alert 2 minutes later. Walgreens Pharmacy, $18.96. Then a third, Target Store, Mission District, $62.11. Dylan stared at the amounts, feeling something crack open in his chest. Marcus had access to unlimited funds, and he'd spent less than $130 on what looked like groceries, medicine, and basic necessities. By 7 a.m., Dylan was dressed and in his Tesla, driving toward the addresses attached to the transactions. He needed to see for himself what Marcus had chosen when given the power to choose anything. He found them at a laundromat on Mission Street. Steam fogged the windows from the industrial washing machines inside, and through the glass, Dylan could see Marcus carefully folding small clothes while Jamie sat beside him on a plastic chair, wearing a navy blue coat that looked new but inexpensive. A bag of groceries sat by their feet. Bread, peanut butter, milk, apples. The foundation of survival rather than indulgence. Dylan parked across the street and watched as Marcus treated each of Jamie's tiny shirts with the concentration of a surgeon, smoothing wrinkles with gentle precision. This wasn't a man who had been handed infinite money 12 hours ago. This was a father doing what fathers do. When Marcus noticed Dylan approaching the laundromat entrance, his face immediately shifted to something between guilt and panic. "I was going to return the card," Marcus said quickly, reaching into his coat pocket. "I just needed a few things for Jamie. Some medicine for his cough, warm clothes, food that won't spoil." "You still have it?" Dylan asked, surprised. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, holding the black card out with both hands like it was made of fragile glass. "I wouldn't steal from you." Dylan didn't take the card. Instead, he looked at the receipt Marcus had clutched in his other hand. The final line made Dylan's throat tighten. Oakland Community Kitchen, $200 donation. "You gave money away," Dylan whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of washing machines. Marcus nodded, his eyes downcast. "They feed families like us every Tuesday and Thursday. People who are worse off than we are. Sometimes a little kindness is the only thing standing between hope and giving up." He said it simply, without asking for praise or recognition, without understanding that he was speaking to a man who'd been starving for proof that generosity still existed in the world. Dylan looked at Jamie, who was carefully eating a peanut butter sandwich, getting crumbs on his new coat but smiling for what looked like the first time in months. "How long have you been homeless?" Dylan asked. Marcus's voice carried the weight of years when he answered. "Since my wife died 3 winters ago. She had cancer, stage 4. We had insurance until my company downsized and cut benefits. Savings disappeared in 6 months between treatments and trying to keep our apartment in Oakland." He paused, watching his son finish his sandwich. "Jamie was born 2 months before she passed. I've been figuring it out ever since. Trying to keep us together. Keep him safe. Some weeks we stay in shelters. Some weeks we don't. But we survive." There was no self-pity in his voice. No anger at circumstances beyond his control. Just a quiet determination that had carried him through the unimaginable. Dylan sat down on the plastic chair next to Jamie, ignoring the curious stares from other laundromat customers. The little boy looked up at him with those serious brown eyes and offered him half of his sandwich without being asked. The gesture nearly broke Dylan's composure entirely. Understanding something profound had just shifted between them. Wealth wasn't about accumulation. It was about what you chose to build for others when you had the chance. Marcus stood slowly, folding the last of Jamie's clothes into a worn plastic bag. "Come with me," he said quietly. "There's something I want to show you before I give this back." Dylan followed them through streets he'd driven past countless times but never really seen. Past bodegas with hand-painted signs in Spanish. Past community centers with basketball courts where teenagers practiced layups. Past murals that told stories of struggle and resilience. 20 minutes later, they stood before the San Francisco Public Library's Mission Bay branch. The building was modest, its brick facade weathered but welcoming. Children's artwork covered the community bulletin board near the entrance. Marcus pushed open the heavy glass door, holding it for Dylan with the same gentleman's gesture he'd probably used when he had a home and job and future that stretched beyond the next meal. Inside, warmth enveloped them like an embrace. A librarian with silver hair and kind eyes looked up from behind the circulation desk and smiled at Jamie with genuine recognition. "You're back," she said fondly, her voice carrying the sort of affection reserved for regulars. Marcus nodded, then led Dylan deeper into the building. Past rows of computers humming quietly, and tables where people of all ages sat reading, studying, seeking. He stopped at the children's section, where beanbags were scattered around low bookshelves filled with picture books. "This is where my wife used to bring him," Marcus said, his voice catching slightly, before she got too sick to leave the apartment. She wanted Jamie to grow up loving books, believing in stories where anything was possible. Jamie immediately gravitated towards a display of picture books, running his small fingers along the spines like he was greeting old friends. "We lost our apartment, our stability, our future." Marcus continued, "But I wanted him to keep this connection to learning, to dreaming about something bigger than our circumstances." Dylan watched as Jamie carefully pulled a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are from the shelf, settling into a beanbag to flip through pages he'd probably memorized. Marcus approached the circulation desk, the credit card trembling slightly in his hands. "I'd like to purchase a family membership," he told the librarian, "and access to the computer lab for educational programs. Maybe some tutoring sessions if they're available." The librarian's eyebrows raised slightly when she saw the black card, but she maintained her professional composure. She quoted prices that seemed almost insultingly small compared to Dylan's usual expenses. A year's membership, computer access, after-school programs, reading materials. But before Marcus could sign anything, Dylan gently placed his hand over the card reader. "Marcus," he said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't name. "What if I told you that this doesn't have to end with one day and one card?" Marcus stared at him like someone afraid to hope too loudly. "I want to help you long-term," Dylan continued, the words coming from somewhere deeper than business strategy or philanthropic duty. "Housing, stable work, real opportunity for you and Jamie. Not charity. Partnership." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and disbelief. "Why," Marcus whispered, "you don't even know us." Dylan had looked at Jamie, now completely absorbed in a book about a little boy who sailed away to a land of monsters and became their king. Then he looked at Marcus, whose entire being radiated the kind of fierce love that had kept them together through 3 winters of uncertainty. "Because," Dylan said, and for the first time in years, he spoke without calculating financial implications. "You're teaching me what I've forgotten about being human." Before Marcus could respond, Jamie tugged on Dylan's sleeve, holding up a hardcover book with a faded purple cover. "Mr. Dylan," he said in his small, serious voice, "can we get this one too?" It was Mama's favorite. Dylan looked down at the book in Jamie's hands. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. The pages were yellowed and soft from years of being loved. Marcus knelt beside his son, and Dylan saw tears glisten in his eyes. "That's the one Mama read to you every night when you were in her belly," Marcus said softly. "She said it was about how beautiful things can grow even in the most broken places." Dylan felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about rediscovering what wealth actually meant. For the first time in his adult life, Dylan understood that his father had been wrong about everything. People like Marcus didn't take advantage of generosity. They transformed it into something sacred. Standing in that library, watching a 6-year-old boy clutch his mother's favorite book, Dylan made a decision that would change all their lives. "My gift," Dylan said quietly, reaching for his own wallet. "Your choice." And as the librarian processed the transactions, Dylan realized he just made the best investment of his career. Sometimes the most valuable assets can't be measured in dollars. Sometimes wealth means having enough love to share, enough courage to trust, and enough wisdom to recognize that growth comes from believing in each other's potential. Outside the library, soft snow began to fall like feathers shaken from heaven. Jamie laughed and reached up to catch flakes on his tongue. And for a moment, the world felt gentle and forgiving. Marcus hoisted his son onto his shoulders, and they walked together toward the bus stop, their breath creating small clouds in the December air. Then Jamie coughed. It started as a small sound, the kind of cough that comes with winter weather and too many nights in the cold, but it quickly became something sharper, wetter, deeper. Something that made Marcus stop walking immediately and lower Jamie to the ground, worry creasing his face. "How long has he had that cough?" Dylan asked, his chest tightening as he watched Jamie struggle to catch his breath. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. 11 weeks. We've counted every day. 11 weeks. Dylan felt the number hit him like a physical blow. Nearly 3 months of a child coughing in the cold, sleeping outside. His small lungs fighting against the elements night after night. The clinic downtown turned us away twice. Marcus continued, shame coloring every word. No insurance, no way to pay up front. They said to come back when it got worse, as if summoned by those words. Jamie coughed again, this time bringing up a tiny spot of blood that stained his new coat. Marcus went pale, gathering his son against his chest with the desperate gentleness of someone who had already lost too much. "We're going to the hospital. Now." Dylan's voice carried an authority that brooked no argument. He was already pulling out his phone to call a ride. "Sir, we can't afford..." Marcus started. "Don't." Dylan cut him off, not unkindly but with absolute finality. "Just don't." The ride to UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital took 18 minutes through afternoon traffic, but it felt like hours. Jamie dozed fitfully against his father's chest while Marcus murmured soft Spanish words Dylan didn't understand, but felt in his bones. Words of comfort, of protection, of promises that everything would be okay. At the hospital, doors parted automatically, and warm air kissed their cold skin. Dylan didn't announce his wealth or demand special treatment. He simply walked to the reception desk with Jamie in his arms and said, "This child needs help. Please." What followed was a blur of examining rooms and concerned faces, of tests and careful questions, and the gradual revelation that Jamie Rodriguez, age 6, had developed pneumonia that was dangerously close to becoming something worse. If you'd waited another week, the attending physician told them gently, we might have been having a very different conversation. Dylan felt the floor beneath him shift. Marcus closed his eyes and gripped the plastic chair until his knuckles went white. Like a man trying to hold on to the edge of the world. He'll recover completely. The doctor continued, but he needs immediate treatment, antibiotics, and most importantly, he needs to be somewhere warm and stable while his lungs heal. The cold, the exposure, it's been slowly weakening his immune system. Marcus opened his eyes and looked directly at Dylan. Not with gratitude, not with shame, but with the raw honesty of a man who had just stared into the abyss of losing his child. What he bought, the doctor added, glancing between them with professional curiosity, the medicine from the pharmacy, the warmer clothes, the food, all of it probably bought us time. Another few days in those conditions, and this would have been much more serious. Dylan's breath shattered in his chest. Marcus hadn't spent the unlimited credit card on luxuries or escapes or selfish desires. He'd spent it on love, on the basic tools of keeping his child alive. And that love, those simple purchases, had quite literally saved Jamie's life. Later, as they sat in Jamie's hospital room watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. Marcus spoke into the quiet darkness. "I don't know how to repay you for this." Dylan looked at the man who'd taught him more about real wealth in 2 days than he'd learned in 29 years. "You already have," Dylan said quietly. "You showed me that everything I thought I knew about people, about generosity, about what makes life valuable, was wrong." In that hospital room, Dylan understood that wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts. Wealth was Marcus counting 11 weeks and never giving up hope. Wealth was choosing to donate money to feed others when you barely had enough yourself. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with medicine. It begins with the recognition that love, in its purest form, transforms everything it touches. 2 weeks later, Dylan stood in the doorway of a modest apartment in the Sunset District, watching Marcus and Jamie explore their new home with the wonder of people who'd forgotten what permanence felt like. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out over the Pacific Ocean, where waves rolled endlessly toward shore like promises being kept. Jamie ran from room to room, his laughter echoing off walls that belonged to them now, his cough completely gone. In the living room, Marcus stood frozen beside boxes of their few possessions, tears streaming down his face as he stared at a lease agreement with his name on it. "It's real," he whispered, like speaking too loudly might break the spell. "It's real," Dylan confirmed, handing him the keys. The apartment was furnished but not expensively, comfortable but not ostentatious, a place where a family could build a life without feeling like they were living in someone else's dream. Dylan had also arranged something else. Marcus would start Monday as a project coordinator for Dylan's new community development initiative, helping to transform abandoned buildings into affordable housing for families facing homelessness. Not charity work, real work, with real responsibilities and a salary that would allow Marcus to rebuild not just his life, but his sense of purpose. But it was more than professional opportunity that had brought them together in this sun-filled apartment. Over the past 2 weeks, as Dylan had helped navigate Jamie's medical care and Marcus's job search, something unexpected had grown between them. The recognition that family can be chosen as well as inherited. Dylan had never talked about his sexuality with Marcus until the evening Jamie asked why Dylan didn't have a family of his own. "I do have a family," Dylan had said, looking at both of them. "Sometimes the people who see you for who you really are aren't the ones you were born to. Sometimes they're the ones who choose to love you anyway." Marcus had nodded with the understanding of someone who'd also learned that acceptance can't be demanded, only offered freely. That night on a desk, Dylan had shared the story that he'd never told anyone, about coming out to his venture capitalist father at 26, about being told he was an embarrassment to the family name, about learning that his father's love had always been conditional on Dylan becoming someone he could never authentically be. "You know what's strange," Dylan had said as they sat on the apartment's small balcony, Jamie asleep between them. "I spent years trying to prove my father wrong about people like us. Tonight, sitting here with you both, I realize I don't need to prove anything anymore." Marcus had smiled then, the first truly relaxed expression Dylan had ever seen on his face. Maybe that's what family really is, the place where you don't have to prove anything. Now, as Jamie settled into his new bedroom with the secret garden placed carefully on his nightstand, Dylan felt something he'd never experienced before. Home wasn't a penthouse with perfect views and expensive art. Home was the sound of a child laughing in the next room and knowing he was safe. The three of them had dinner together that first night, takeout from a local taqueria spread across the small dining table. Jamie chattered about his upcoming enrollment at the neighborhood elementary school, about the library card in his pocket, about the ocean he could see from his bedroom window. Marcus looked across the table at Dylan, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was too much gratitude to express, too much transformation to process, too much unexpected love to put into words. Later, after Jamie had fallen asleep clutching his mother's favorite book, Dylan and Marcus sat on the couch talking about the future they were building together. Not as savior and saved, but as partners in the radical act of creating something good from something broken. Dylan's company would expand his community housing initiative. Marcus would help identify families who needed support. Jamie would grow up knowing that home wasn't just a place you lived, but a feeling you created with people who chose to see your full self. 6 months later, when Dylan's father called attempting to reconcile, Dylan listened politely and then declined. "I've learned something about family," Dylan told him calmly. "It's not about who shares your blood or business interests. It's about who shows up when showing up matters most." As he hung up the phone, Dylan looked out his window at Marcus and Jamie at the neighborhood playground, both of them laughing at something only they understood. Dylan had given Marcus unlimited access to wealth for 24 hours, expecting to learn something about human nature. Instead, he discovered something infinitely more valuable. Have you ever found family in the most unexpected places? Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the depth of connection we create when we're brave enough to trust each other completely. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Heart Stories for more real journeys about love and the beautiful families we build.